How's everybody? Good, good. We are, so excited that this day is finally here. As you can imagine, it's kind of a feat to pull off a conference of 500 and some people. It's actually the first time that we have done this. So hopefully you enjoy the day and you find things that are beneficial to you. So to get set up for the day, there's three things that I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes. One, really just share that the primary purpose of today's event is really to celebrate as a group and say thank you to all of you as teaching staff, directors, board members, administrators, office staff, those of you that are the ones that make these institutions run and function and be a good place for students. Secondly, I want to talk a little bit about the overall purpose of the day and our value in bringing together everyone to learn and network. Then lastly, what I'd like to do is just take a little bit of time to talk about Pillsbury United Community's role and perspective in this work as an authorizer. So I imagine not everybody is totally clear on the role of an authorizer. So we'll visit that a little bit and talk about how we see our position in this work. So first, really as I was mentioning, this is a thank you to all of you, providing you with an opportunity to see some good presenters, participate in some good workshops, so we just really appreciate you all making the time on for what some of you I know is actually a day off, so we appreciate you spending the time with us. I'd like to take a little bit of a second to recognize a few different groups. So first, I'd like to recognize our school directors. So school directors, if you could stand up. So the school directors really deserve a lot of credit for bringing this event together and bringing you all together today. Some of you may or may not know the school directors of all of our authorized charter schools come together once a month to share best practices, learn from one another, form kind of a peer group. And so back in January, February, the idea really bubbled up from the directors to have a joint staff forum. And from what I understand, I think in Minnesota, this is the first time that a whole authorizer portfolio has really come together. So kudos to you as directors for having that sort of vision. I would also like to take a second to recognize all of our schools. So we'd like to get a sense of who is in the room. So if we can identify some of those schools. Staff from Minnesota Transitions, if you could stand up so we can see where you are. How about the Minnesota Internship Center? Minnesota International Middle School. Twin Cities International Elementary School. Minnesota Online High School. How about Learning for Leadership? We also have UBA Medical Academy. How about High School for the Recording Arts? Jennings Community Learning Center. Stonebridge World School. Sojourner Truth Academy. Minnesota Math and Science Academy. LoveWorks Academy for the Performing Arts. Rochester Math and Science Academy. And last but not least, Doogsy Academy. Thank you. Wow, some of your staffs are really large. We appreciate you being here today. Next, I would like to introduce our charter school authorization staff. So I'd like to bring everybody up on stage. You may not have met all of us yet. Certainly some of us have different roles and functions in the department. And I think it's important to kind of recognize everybody that is doing the amazing work alongside of all of you are. So you've already met Lexi Prawl, who is our operations manager. So Lexi has been with us since January of this year, so our second newest staff member. And then between Lexi and the next person I'm going to introduce, we're really the key critical pieces in putting this event together, so they deserve some extra credit for that. And then we have Emily Edstrom, who is a NACSA fellow with us. NACSA is the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, a partnership between NACSA, the Humphrey School at the U of M, and us. So Emily is our data coordinator and has been with us since early summer and will be with us until at least May of next year. So thank you, Emily. And then lastly, we have Coach Larry McKenzie, who is our charter school authorizer liaison, who many of you know, local legend, very prominent community person, educational advocate, and he's really the face of the department that most of you probably know over all four of us. So welcome, Larry. Cool. Good. All right. Thank you very much. So now that we've taken a second to introduce ourselves to one another, the second piece that I want to talk about is the overall purpose of the day. As I mentioned, this is really the first time that we have brought together all of our staff in this fashion. 2 years ago, Larry and I brought together the school directors, board chairs, some key admin staff as a first round of this experience. And you know, as we've really started to dig into our role as charter school authorizers, one of the key pieces that we have central in our value system is around peer learning. And you know, I think some of the times we look at charter schools, you know, as an island in and of itself, and as a charter director, you know, it's hard to get out of the building, and so we recognize that as a director, you can feel peerless. And not have folks to really bounce ideas off of. So there's a premium in bringing our school directors together once a month. So this is really an extension of this idea, in that as charter school staff, you also may not actively have conversations with other charter school staff. And so we thought it would be important to bring you all together and kind of see the broader network that you're actually tapped into, because this work really isn't just about your individual school, it's about all of our institutions and how we fill the gaps in service areas that we have and how we create quality and relevant educational options for children wherever they may be. This is also representative of PUC's desire to lead in the field of authorizing in a very different and more meaningful way. You know, I think if you look at the role of the authorizer, which I will talk a little bit more about, it's very compliance oriented. And for us at Pillsbury, we want to really go beyond that idea of just being compliant with Minnesota state statute, making sure you get your, you know, test results. It's much bigger for us. And so we as an authorizer find that this is very valuable. We're very excited for you to engage with the presenters and workshops that will share best practices, new thoughts, and hopefully give you an opportunity to network. We noticed some schools interacting already during breakfast, so thank you for doing that. Continue to do that. We'll also facilitate some of that networking during lunch, kind of cross-function and kind of by similar areas. But please make sure that you do spend some time networking. We're very excited to offer a slate of very amazing practitioners and leaders who are here to share with you during their workshops, including many from within the network that's already in this room. So some of the charter schools are presenting workshops themselves. We have Alex Pate coming to talk about his Innocent Classrooms technology. We have Joe Nathan, a longtime charter school advocate, doing a workshop. Eli Kramer from Hiawatha Academies will be doing a workshop to talk about the great successes they've had at Hiawatha. And there's a whole host of other workshops, so hopefully you find something that resonates with you. So I'd like to go on to the conference themes for the day. So I'm going to take the mic out so I can see a little bit more kind of what is on the screen. So the conference themes that we put out previously are not actually listed in your program, but they are in previous communications that we put out. So one, the idea that we have here is really about developing a school culture around equity. At Pillsbury United Communities, educational equity, racial equity, socioeconomic equity is really critical to the work that we do. Not just critical, it's the reason that we do the work that we do. And we have a really firm belief that in order to get to educational equity, children need to feel affirmed and valued in their cultural identity. The second one, and you can just leave this slide up here for a second. Defining diversity, equity, racism, and inclusion. Not all of the workshops will hit on this topic, but there's a few workshops that are kind of embedded in both sessions because we really feel if we're really trying to get to a place of educational equity, we need to start from the same grounding. And we need to have a similar understanding of, what do we mean by these words? How is diversity different than inclusion? How is racism different than inclusion? How does equity play into all of those areas? So please, as you go through the whole day, think about these terms and how they might apply to you in the work that you're doing in your school. Another theme is about engaging students to be change agents. I think the reason Pillsbury got into this work is not just to have high test scores, but it's also to train and guide and teach the next generation of folks that are going to take care of the institutions that we currently lead. And so really folding in things like some of our schools do around internships, global travel, thinking differently about the world, really encouraging our students to go on and continue to be change agents is premium for us. Then also creating and refining mission indicators for communications. I'll get into some of our strategies in a little bit, which this really speaks to. But I think we are at a point where we need to get more focus on measurable outcomes and setting goals and targets for ourselves that we can actually achieve, that we can show to the external environment, this is what our unique success looks like. Then also strengthening commitment to socioeconomic education reform. As I mentioned, Pillsbury isn't in this work just to make sure you get your reports in on time. It's really about doing something different in the realm of education. So certainly it's no secret to most of you that when you look at data about Minnesota, when you look at graduation rates, we have the unfortunate privilege of being the worst in the country. And so there is a huge disconnect in the way that Minnesota is structured. You look at health outcomes, education, home ownership, employment, and Minnesota as an aggregate is one of the best in the country. But then when you look and disaggregate that information and look at it across racial ethnic boundaries, we're the worst in almost every category. So there's something here that we all need to get a lot better at figuring out how we deal with it. And so that's going to be a key aspect for not just this conference, but how we work, how we do the work going forward. And lastly, it's also about utilizing rigor, high expectations, and data to obtain remarkable results. And that goes to kind of having more of a mission and outcome orientation. So those are the conference themes for the day. Hopefully those resonate with some of you. We definitely would love to engage with you and have more conversation over the school year on how you see yourselves playing into these. So then that really brings us to the role of PUC as an authorizer and what our perspective is. So Pillsbury United Communities Charter School Authorization Department has been on a very intentional journey over the last 3 years. Just as authorizers have as the landscape shifts, Larry McKenzie and I took over the department now 3 years ago, and we really wanted to approach the work from a very intentional space. So in a little bit, I'm going to share our 7 strategies for stronger schools that we designed in 2012. We're now about halfway through that 5-year strategic framework, which I think we've had a tremendous amount of success. I think the fact that you are all here today is an indication of that success. So as I was mentioning, some of you may not fully understand what our role as an authorizer is, so I'll just take a second to talk about it. Broadly, from a standardized perspective, the role of an authorizer is really to provide oversight and monitoring of board governance, academic performance, and financial health. So we really are entrusted by the taxpayers in the Department of Education to oversee and make sure that those tax dollars are spent wisely, that they're producing results, and that the institutions you all lead are quality enough to remain open. So we have the charge to make that final determination, and it's one that we don't take lightly. The main way that we do this is through site visits to schools. We also review monthly financial statements, board meeting collateral, agendas, minutes, try to stay up on the business and the work of the school. Our goal is also to establish goals alongside the school and use those goals and embed them in contracts that maintain accountability to results. So charter schools are essentially contract-based schools where you have a set of academic and non-academic goals that the whole school is trying to strive for. So my kind of broad recommendation and encouragement is for you as directors to share those goals with your staff and make sure that everybody really understands what is that North Star that you're going towards. Same thing with your boards. All of your boards should know what your goals are. So if you don't know what those academic and non-academic goals are, ask. Because as teaching staff, you are the front line to make that happen. One of our other roles is really to work with the Minnesota Department of Education through ongoing communication and making sure that we understand what their requirements are and that we're shifting that back to the school. But above and beyond that, it's really also about relationship building. Many of you have seen Larry McKenzie in your schools. I know that he loves to be in our schools a lot. And that's really his key role, is to making sure that that relationship stays solid and the lines of communication stay open so that we can always understand what the overall academic, financial, and governance health of the school is. So beyond that, PUC really views our role as more integrated than traditional authorizers. We understand that our students require high levels of support and wraparound services. They require schools that understand the full picture of their lives and work to meet them wherever they are at. Many of our schools focus on alternative learning models, dropout recovery, internships, and the arts. And so because you understand students' full lives, we as an authorizer also have to understand that same thing. Frequently, the way that I talk about our position as an authorizer is you kind of have different camps of authorizers. In Minnesota, there's about 25 different authorizers. Some are very little, have 1 or 2 schools, and there's a handful of us that have anywhere from 15 to 30 schools. So there's some authorizers that look at the work, and I'll say the way that I normally talk about it, which isn't the nicest way to say it, but really as the compliance police, making sure you turn things in on time, you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's. They see that as their primary role. Pillsbury sees their primary role as an authorizer to ensure that students have quality and relevant educational options wherever they may be coming from in life. So having those 2 different starting points, the path to that mission is going to look very different. And so that's why we're doing things like this today. We have a high importance on valuing kids. We expect strongly from our schools that you respect and affirm the cultural identities of your students and that you know that they can succeed. When you stand in front of your classroom in the morning, do you look at those children and know that they're going to have a bright future? We're not interested in schools that have teaching staff that don't see the ultimate best in their students. And I think that we flow that down to our school directors. We've been in many of your classrooms, and we see that happening in action. One thing we don't believe in is the achievement gap. We actually don't believe in the achievement gap. That's a phrase that gets thrown on a lot, and there's some resonance for us that allows us to not believe that. What we believe in is the opportunity gap. We believe in the attitude gap, and we believe in the belief gap. The achievement gap for us puts the onus on children and says that they are the ones to blame for their own achievement. We fundamentally believe that is not the case. They are subject to the institutions and environments around them, and that's why we believe in the opportunity, attitude, and belief gap, because it's about adults around them who either believe in them or don't, who have an attitude that they can succeed or they cannot, and that's where the fundamental difference is. Again, it's about the environment and institutions that surround them. And as the institutions that engage with them for 8 hours a day, we collectively have significant power in affecting their learning. We must all collectively accept this responsibility, and I know that many of us already have. We see it every time we visit your schools. If you look at the power in this room, part of the goal is for you to be able to see the power in this room. Again, when you look at the educational disparities across the Twin Cities, those of us in this room, we have approximately 7,400 children in our classrooms. That's a significant amount of children. So that means if we all come together as a group and we actively believe that everybody can succeed and perform, then I believe that we can do that. And Larry and I and the rest of the charter school staff believe that in 3 to 5 years, we can make significant gains in the overall academic performance of our students. So moving on to strategically how we get there. That was a lot about our perspective, about our value systems, and our belief. And I want to talk a little bit about the 5-year strategic framework that Larry and I have put together. So if you can bring up the slides. So here is our 7 strategies for stronger schools. The way that we've laid this out is in the first bubble, we saw that as the most immediate and most important strategy for us to address. And then it flows down to what may be the most difficult challenge to undertake. So first, you have articulating our unique success and niche of schools and the work that they do. When Larry and I took over the department, admittedly, the reputation of Pillsbury United Communities was that it wasn't a very good authorizer. It didn't have a lot of staff capacity, a good educational advocate, but people weren't really sure if it was really getting the job done. And I think secondarily, it wasn't, is Pillsbury getting the job done, but also, why is Pillsbury authorizing schools that are consistently posting low-performing results? So it became our primary charge to describe to external stakeholders the value of all of our schools. You may have an organization like Minnesota Internship Center that may not have the best academic performance, but they are really engaging students that haven't been in school for a long time, students that may be either currently or ex-gang affiliated, students that have wrestled with attendance, but they really step up to the plate and re-engage those kids. And for us, there's a lot of value in that outside of just an MMR score. And so that really was our first task, was to really share to the outside world, talk to MDE about why we were standing so firmly behind so many of our schools. The second one is around expanding our authorizer capacity. We certainly have the belief that if we expect things from you as school, we have to start looking at ourselves first. We're not going to ask you all to do something that we're not willing to do. So we've willingly entered into kind of independent evaluations of ourselves. Last summer, we spent about 6 months working with the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, pulling apart every single process we had, looking at every single document and asking us a million questions around why we do that and what the value of it is. So we've done that. Third, it's about identifying areas for internal improvement. Based on the second strategy, we then needed to put that into action. So we created kind of a work plan that lasts about 2 years to make sure that as a department, we are really kind of pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps and doing the hard work that we need to do. Then the next one is closing chronically low-performing schools. This is an unfortunate task, and as an authorizer, it's not one that's easy to do. Larry and I had the unfortunate opportunity to close a school in 2013. It served a unique niche and model. It was really focused on kids that were on kind of an autism spectrum, having significant behavioral issues, but ultimately the school was just not doing what it had intended to do, and we had to close it. And it wasn't an easy task to do, but as is the great charter bargain, because it's based in contracts, academic performance, we had no other choice but to close that school. So we must always keep this strategy open as an option. Then the next one is to identify 1 to 2 schools for refresh interventions. And what that means is that you would have a school that has consistently low academic performance, but rather than closing the school, you make significant efforts to restructure, bring in new academic curriculum, instructional approaches. You may identify an external group such as a charter management organization. You may partner with other entities. And so for us, identifying schools for turnaround and refresh options is significantly better than closure, because my personal perspective is that when you close a school, that's when you lock in taxpayer loss. To open a school costs at least $2 to $3 million, usually significantly more than that. So if you can invest a few $100,000 in improving the existing school, keeping students in that school, not disrupting families' lives, that's infinitely preferable for us. We're actually currently embarking on this strategy as we speak. So I do want to take a second to give a shout out and recognize LoveWorks Academy for the Performing Arts to being our first school to do this. So yes, please, let's recognize them for that. Willingly coming to the table and asking for assistance is not something that comes easy to most folks. So I think LoveWorks Academy really deserves a lot of kudos for being willing to embark on this journey. They've now spent close to half a year speaking through this. They're in the middle of an RFP release, looking for external operators to come in and assist them. And we look forward to hitting the ground running for the academic year starting in 2016. Moving on from that, then it is transferring in existing high-performing schools. Some authorizers are getting out of the business, and if there's an existing high-performing school that we feel like all the rest of you can learn from, we want to bring them into our portfolio, and we want to invite them to events like this. So we have 3 of our schools here today that have just began working with us as of September. So transferring from Concordia was Twin Cities Elementary, Twin Cities Middle School, and then UBA Medical Academy, our Minnesota International Middle School and UBA Medical Academy. So we're very thankful to have you all on board. Then the last strategy. Then the last strategy is to open new high-promise schools. So we don't want to just be in the business of closing schools or transferring in, but we also want to open schools that we feel are going to be very beneficial to our students. So we opened our first new school in a very long time with Minnesota Math and Science Academy, and they're here, so you can appreciate them. And Minnesota Math and Science Academy is operated by Concept Schools, which is a very strong charter management organization that Larry and I have had the fortunate ability to get to know more and more over the course of the last year. So those are our 7 strategies. As we have started to enact this, and Larry and I have traveled the country visiting high-performing schools, serving very similar populations to the schools that you all, or to the students that you all serve. We know that high achievement is possible. If we're going to New York and Chicago and other large metropolitan areas in the country, and we see schools that have 95% free and reduced lunch, 50% ELL population, and they're having 100% graduation rates, 100% of their high school graduates are getting accepted to college. We know that it can be done here as well, and we want to put ourselves on the table saying that we will push and we will do everything we can to bring resources to the table and encouragement to make sure that we are all getting to that same level, not just because we want to be better, but because our students deserve it. So moving on from there, to finish this piece out, to just remind you on kind of what our primary focus is, and that is that schools that understand and are affirming of students' identities, staffing where continuous improvement and shared learning are highly valued, and where strong leaders and strong boards make great decisions for kids, those are the types of schools that are going to post great academic returns. And those are the types of schools that are actually going to move kids into a positive trajectory. So in conclusion, we truly appreciate you being here to learn from one another. We want to again thank you for your conscious choice to be in this field. You have the opportunity to create change every day, and you are the fortunate ones that get to be in those classrooms with your students every single day. Through your work, you create connection to a world of opportunity and possibility. And lastly, I hope you have a good day. Please enjoy the program.